So we're gonna get right into the questions today, and we're kind of gonna go right for it. And so the very first question that I have for my panelists today are, who is an ally? And I will start with Bruno.
All right. Thank you to all the panelists. And yeah, who is an ally? To me, an ally is somebody who shows up, especially during those difficult moments. There's no, in Spanish, there's like ser y estar. It's like being and like I don't know, the act of being. So it's not like you are something. It's like you're not a thief. You stole something. Same thing with ally. It's like you can't define yourself as an ally. You can do things that support you in being an ally, right? It's not like a part of and something there that like you can't remove, right? Being an ally means to me showing up. So who can be an ally? To be honest, anybody and everybody can be an ally. It just depends on how you show up, right? And not how you show up for you, how you show up, like in what ways is comfortable for you. Obviously, you want to show up in a way that's like safe for yourself and others around you. That's first and foremost. But also being an ally, to me, means to show up for others how they want to be supported, right? So it can be a lot of different things, but really anybody can be an ally personally, but it's just about showing up.
I'm gonna jump to Gina.
Thank you. I think Bruno explained it really well. Just want to reiterate that being an ally means to listen, which sometimes can be the hardest thing to do. But I think listening to varied experiences and showing up for people in the ways that they need, as opposed to ways that you think others want to be helped, is a demonstration of being a good ally. Understanding the struggles that others are going through, and really take it upon yourself to understand and educate yourself on the struggles, as opposed to expecting other people to explain it to you, and really taking action for the people who don't have power or don't have opportunities, really making way and making way for others so that they can have those opportunities as well. I think it also takes someone a lot of mindfulness to be able to recognize the inequities in society. So I feel that a strong ally is someone who is really open to listening to different perspectives and also seeing the inequities in society.
Thank you, Gina. So then the next question is, what are the responsibilities of an effective ally? Christine.
The way I see the responsibilities of an effective ally, I think Bruno and Gina have touched on the most important ones, which is first and foremost, we have to examine ourselves if we want to be allies, so that we are not trying to force our idea of what being an ally is on someone. So it's not about what you think being an ally is, it's listening and getting to know the person and how they want to be supported. So that's the first responsibility that any ally has, to the self-reflection, always be getting to know yourself, who you are, how you stand up and show up for the people that need you to be their allies, in terms of whether it's speaking out, calling out privilege, calling out, things that happen around you that are not right, giving education and information and resources to the person that needs to be supported. but always make sure that it's coming from the person that you're trying to be an ally for and how they need the support, and not what we think they want or what we think would be good for them. So that's the first responsibility of an ally, getting to know yourself and getting to listen to the person you're trying to support and seeing what they need. Because being an ally is, as much as it is part of our lived experience and using that to share, to connect, it's also mostly, it's about the person that we are supporting. So that's the first responsibility. The second one, or another one that I think is very, very important of being an ally, is just always learning, always growing. It goes hand in hand with the first one. And also unlearning and knowing that we grow up in societies where we are taught what we're supposed to be or what expectations are of certain people, certain backgrounds and the like. And sometimes those are things we need to unlearn. We have set ourselves in certain mindsets or how we've grown up. And so that's another thing. And then using time, resources, money, whatever it may be that is required to support usually traditionally disenfranchised groups, people that have not been listened to, have not been taken seriously, have been put in a position where they have to either explain themselves or always go, the way I think of an ally, or what I say in terms of this last point, is that for the most part, in society today, especially here living in the US, the onus is always put on the disenfranchised group to be the one to educate people and do all the work that is required, whether it's emotional work, whether it's whatever it may be. So being an ally is kind of taking that off the plate and doing as much as you can to stand up for someone. And the way I always like to think about it is you're just amplifying someone's voice. You're amplifying who they are. You're amplifying them to the world, so that you're kind of standing in that gap that sometimes we create or society creates. So, with an amplifier, just like anything else, it's not about you and what you think. It's not about what you're saying. It's amplifying their strength, their energy, and trying to use all your resources yourself, in education, information, and otherwise, to be there for that person. So those are the responsibilities I think we all should always be thinking about, and always should have in the back of our mind as we try to be effective allies.
Elba, what do you have to say on this?
I think Christine actually covered a lot of my points. So thank you so much, Christine. I think just two that I like that are very personal for me are just like listening. One of the biggest responsibilities for an ally is just listening what the other person has to say. It's not really about you. It's about the person that needs the resources and the support. It's about and sometimes they don't really need anything, they just need someone to listen to their story, to what you have to say. I know that when someone doesn't know something, or they don't understand the history behind immigration, or they don't understand the history behind certain laws and policies, they want to ask question after question as a way to inform themselves. But a simple suggestion is like, take mental notes, be present when you're having a conversation with someone. Don't interrupt their, if someone is opening up to share their struggles and the oppression and the things that have happened in their life, don't cut them off and ask like different questions. And why did the person not do this? Or why didn't you seek support here? Or why didn't you ask somebody here? Just listen, sometimes it's as simple as that. And after, then you can, seek those answers for yourself. Or once the person is done, then you can respectfully say, hey, I want to get to understand your position. Can I ask certain questions for clarification so that I do have proper information? And so that one, and I think another big one is just like Christine mentioned, just unlearn, you know, like we all have different backgrounds. We grew up in different areas, different towns, cities, etc. So just, it's okay to unlearn a lot of things that we have been taught by our parents, by our communities, by society, by history. It's okay to challenge ourselves. I know that change is hard and it's scary, but it makes, you know, it's the way that it needs to happen sometimes. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Elva. I'm gonna go to the next question, and then, so what do we, and when I say we, I mean folks from different racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, what do we want from an ally? Miles, what do you have to say on this?
I think everybody's really hit it on the head, this point about allyship. That's really important, that our allyship to any person or any community is more about them and their identity than it is about us being an ally. We're not the ones who really define what that is if we're in an allyship position. So I'll speak from my own experience in that I think in lots of circles, you'll hear people use the term co-conspirator as a proxy for ally. And I think that's really powerful, because I personally want someone not only to be a friend, which I think is a prerequisite to being an ally, not only to literally ally themselves with me, to have the same goals as me, to support my goals, but I want them to put their name, their privilege on the line in situations where they have a platform that I might not necessarily have just because of the way things are. So if we're, you know, in this theoretical conspiracy to undo whatever social order it is through which you're trying to be my ally or vice versa, then I want you to co-conspire with me.
Thank you, Miles. Bruno, what are your personal preferences and what do you want from an ally?
So one of just speaking on an experience that happened to me in the DR. It was a white cisgendered woman volunteer who questioned me when I was speaking on behalf of my experience as a Latino man in a Latin American country. And so the first thing was like, it's very difficult to consider anybody an ally when they're questioning you, right? So it's like if somebody's opening up to you, this isn't a moment of interrogation. So, you know, it's not just about listening, it's about like active listening where you can just take in what they're saying and then kind of, you know, let them know that you understand or that you're hearing them, right? That's like number one for me. Is very important. Another thing for me, one of my preferences is I'm probably going to say something that makes you really uncomfortable. Not in the sense like that is going to, that I'm like trying to belittle anybody or belittle anybody's experience. But when I speak my truth, it might make others feel uncomfortable in the sense that like, you know, I can tell you some of the realities in New York City about growing up, like in project buildings and stuff. And then, you know, somebody might feel uncomfortable about the realities of that I'm speaking on. And just being able to sit in that uncomfortable space, you know, just being able to essentially, it's like for me watching a scary movie, you know, it's just like, it's there. I don't necessarily like it, but I'm gonna sit through it because it's the right thing to, I mean, you know, you're there to like see what's happening and see the movie, and you're there for your friend, right? Which Miles said that it's one of the big prerequisites. And then one of the other things, especially about that I like asked for of my like all of my folks who are like cannot relate to a certain struggle of being a minority or a person of color in the United States, it's know your history. Know your history and be critical about it. It's something that always really struck me because a lot of folks would just very quickly say, well, my family was poor, they weren't slave owners or something like that. And to me, I'm like, it's not about your family, not like, it's about being in those spaces. It's about knowing the history and knowing what in general, you know, your family may have gone through. And it's about being critical of that and how their privilege was leveraged during those times. So those three things are very, like, those are some of my personal preferences. When you can be critical of yourself and of your own history, then you can start questioning some of the other things that are around and can be a better ally.
Thank you, Bruno. I'm going to go to our next question now, and it's talking about a specific Peace Corps experience. So if anybody in here is not a returned Peace Corps volunteer, didn't get evacuated, or never was in the Peace Corps, this is going to be specific to their in-country experience. And so my question is, how did your Peace Corps experience influence you to help others? Miles.
Sure. I think for anyone, for everyone who's been a Peace Corps volunteer, I think we all are taught or just learned through our experience to think a lot about other people's perspective. I mean, lots of that experience is to share different perspectives, not only with between volunteers and host country nationals, but amongst volunteers from lots of diverse backgrounds. So I think that like underlying experience of Peace Corps, I guess taught me to support others by questioning how my experience in everyday life is different than other people. So I know in the Dominican Republic, I'm sure this is very similar in some other countries as well as in the United States for many people, but our women volunteers overwhelmingly experienced catcalling and sexual harassment. So my everyday experience, being able to compare what was happening to me to what was happening to them and actually talking about it, and on more than a surface level, I think that allowed me to try to be a better ally in that sense. So I think remembering, if you're taking anything away from your Peace Corps experience, remembering the conversations that you have, or the broadening of perspective that you had, and trying to compare what you're doing on an everyday basis, how you're experiencing something on an everyday basis, and how other people in that same situation may be sitting right next to you are experiencing something completely different. Because if you're not questioning that, then you're probably overlooking something big.
Christine, what experiences did you have that it influenced you to support others in your service?
Well, there were quite a couple, and you know, first and foremost was coming here as an immigrant, and then the first time that I guess I experienced learning about myself and even my own culture, where I've come from, was just moving to the US. I was a teenager, and then as I grew up and started questioning even what I myself had been taught and what I actually believe and the like, it was an interesting time because coming from that, you know, being a woman of color, an immigrant now living in the US, there was also a lot of learning for me to do. For example, on the African American lived experience and history in the US, because I had the history that I knew from Kenya coming here and what I had learned from books, but then I came here and lived that, and you know, it was my real life in terms of everything that or what aspects of the history kind of apply to me each day, and also what I may have been overlooking. So it was a good, like, humbling experience for me to get to learn. And the reason I actually started with that, my coming here, was that then going to the Gambia as a Peace Corps volunteer that's American, that doesn't necessarily speak exactly how people think and doesn't sound the way people think a Peace Corps volunteer should sound, and people are confused that I'm actually from, you know, something in the Gambia and I'm actually from Kenya. It was a good opportunity for me to just showcase the diversity of the US in like a very real way. Just being there and telling people about what my life is in the US was just an interesting experience to begin with, and all the different questions I got, both from host country nationals, or even just things, even from other Peace Corps volunteers and the like. So that for me kind of just started bringing things to the surface, and things that I knew I wanted to address. I'll share one example. So I was serving in the Gambia. I'm a Black woman. Most people there are Black, like the people who are host country nationals, and it's that experience of like trying to do a project and working with your with people, whether it's host country nationals or others. And for example, one that always just like really bothered me was like people would come up to me and not think I was a Peace Corps volunteer. But it wasn't even that. It was the fact that I had a lot of like, oh, I just thought you were another Gambian. And I was like, that's offensive in so many ways. Like, how do we start addressing that? Because if I was a Gambian, I'd be proud of that. I'm very proud of being Kenyan and the like. So this is a very small example of many things that kind of happened. But the reason why I bring this up was that it really highlighted to me the importance of just kind of, like you're saying, we can, even two people who look the same, sitting there, going through the same experience, can be having a very different experience. And just kind of noticing the nuance between all our lived experiences, and actually acknowledging that and actually validating that for people that you're working with and you're being an ally to. Because sometimes and we all do it, it's just a human behavior, but we always need to question ourselves, where we generalize or we assume like these people experience it this way, these people experience it this way. And especially these days with nuance kind of almost gone in terms of the way we talk about things. Kind of everyone presents things as black and white, one way versus the other. Just remembering that nuance, that like the variety of experience that's there, whether it's work, homeschool, professional, lived experience that exists, and how that can change the experience for everyone else. This kind of was brought out for me when I was a Peace Corps volunteer coming back, and it's something that I wanted to highlight coming back, just being, teaching myself and also being an ally for others and teaching others, just the variety that's there, and why it takes work, it takes time to learn, to grow, to hear all these experiences and bring them back. But if we all just sit even and listen but don't do anything about it, then for me it doesn't really, other than teaching ourselves, it doesn't really go further. And I wanted to go further. I wanted to take that next step. Like I think Miles said before, it's putting yourself on the line, where there's something on the line, but you're putting yourself out there to show that you stand for something, and to educate and learn and grow as well. So that was kind of the thing that I brought back, with having had all different people's experiences, having had my own experiences, and wanting to highlight that within the people I was around, and making sure that we were all like cognizant of that as we go through our everyday lives.
Thank you, Christine. Bruno, share your experiences.
So as I mentioned before, I'm a very proud mixed Latinx person. But my accent is very much Colombian, like very, very Colombian, to the point where every single Dominican noticed that I was Colombian, and they didn't think that I was an American, including a lot of folks in the National Police Force. So just a couple of things about my experience and how it influenced me to support others. When I first got to the island, there wasn't a diversity and inclusion committee at all. Myself, along with some other folks, some who are with us today, actually started it. And we started it because we felt that diverse voices weren't being necessarily heard. And because we felt that it was something that we needed to promote within the organization, as well as for the organization to promote it with the the communities that we'd be sharing with. Um, and so for me, one of the best things that I did during Peace Corps was be a part of the diversity and inclusion committee, and then also be a part of it, but step back and let others take charge of things that are going on, right? A lot of times there were volunteers in the Dominican Republic who actually they got sent all the way to the border, and they were Black, and this was during a time when Peace Corps, when Dominican Republic and Haiti were having a lot of trouble. And I mean, there's a, if you don't know about that history, about the history of Haiti and the DR, they have deep roots even within the U.S. So I highly suggest everybody here, please go read up on it. In Cultured Company is amazing if you're looking for some of those resources. But Peace Corps had sent a volunteer out to the border, and she is Black, and they stopped her on the way into the Capitol, and they detained her because they thought she was Haitian and because they thought that her passport was fake. And this is an instance where a lot of us as volunteers felt that, you know, maybe if Peace Corps had some more diverse voices within it, they wouldn't have reacted, or they would have been better equipped to support this young woman. Unfortunately, what transpired afterwards was very traumatic for the volunteer, and she ended up ending her service early. And so, you know, seeing all that, seeing a lot of the stuff that I was going through as well, I got sent as I love my site, and what I went through wasn't even half of what this fellow volunteer who was in my group went through. But I also got profiled as a drug dealer, and being Colombian, that's like something that's very typical, especially with my accent. And I was placed on the border of Haiti and the DR, which is a hot spot for like money laundering and drug traffic and all that kind of stuff. My community, I never really saw any of that stuff, but you know, folks would tell me that in the middle of the night things would happen. But I got actually pulled off a bus one time and profiled as a drug dealer, because during the time there's a famous drug dealer, his name is Quirino. He had just come back to town, and so everybody was like, oh, okay, so Quirino's back and this Colombian guy is here, they must be working together, right? So I mean, there was a lot of different things. I've shared that with other folks in Peace Corps, including like two women in Peace Corps who I felt super comfortable with, that I believe still work with Peace Corps, and they were very like understanding and listened and all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't scared, and I know that I wasn't scared because one, my skin color, I was the whitest person in my town other than the father, who was from Wisconsin, like El Padre. And you know, like I had a privilege of being a light-skinned Latino in a Black Latin American country, right? But then again, like, you know, a lot of times folks weren't expecting somebody like me to show up, you know. If I go back right now, they call me like Carlos Vives, which is like like a big Colombian like rock star. But you know, it's just like sharing stories like these, showing other volunteers, because the majority of the volunteers that folks are expecting are white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed men or women, right? Or at least like very white, very gringo folks. And so, yeah, I mean, I experienced those things, and because I experienced those things, and because I shared my experience, and because others shared their experience with me, we started forming support groups. And so I actually would start checking in on other Latinx folks in Peace Corps as well. And we had like a little chain going for a while and just checking in like, hey, how you doing? You taking care of yourself? Yes, cool. Obviously some folks internet or phones, it was a different situation, but we always tried to check in with each other. And I feel like that sense of community is something that influenced the way that I support others now, to this present day, where I actually have established a really beautiful community here in New York City, where we like listen to podcasts and talk about our experiences as Latinx folks in the US or Spanish speakers in the US. And then we also discuss all the colorism, racism, and all the other things that not just plague the US, but also plague our countries. In Colombia, there's so many things that are ongoing. We still have a 50-year plus long war. Like Black and Indigenous folks get murdered every day for protecting their land. It's very similar to stuff that's going on in the US. So this conversation isn't just, about the US. To me, this conversation is a global conversation as well. But to me, my Peace Corps experience influenced me to really put community ahead of everything else. And that to me is how Peace Corps experience, my Peace Corps experience influenced me in supporting others.
Wow, Bruno, that was powerful. Thank you. Elba, would you like to share something?
Just really quick, just like how my experience influenced me to help others is just be of a resource for other Latina women who decide to join Peace Corps. As the only girl in my family and the oldest, telling both of my parents that I was gonna leave home and go to another country, that they purposely immigrated from a developing country so that I wouldn't have to go through a trouble of not having electricity or not having internet access or not having clean water. So just being able to support other Peace Corps volunteers or other applicants in my previous roles, as well as a higher education administrator or higher education professional, I've been able to support those women and have those conversations and how they can have those conversations with their parents, because, like our immigrant parents, like they come to the United States to give us a better life, better opportunities. And so at least like in my experience, my parents could not understand why I was purposely going to a different country, help other people, and go through all that trouble when I can very easily work here, help people here, and not have to go through all the trouble of not having electricity, like going through the trouble of like having rats and mice and having having Zika and dengue and like all these things. I just couldn't understand it. They said like, you're crazy. Like it makes no sense to us. Why did we go through all that trouble so that you can do that? And so having those conversations with our parents as Latina women who have expectations to start families and as educated women as well, we're already going against a lot of the things that our parents and our culture has for us. I've been able to do that for some of my other fellow volunteers and actually I had it with my follow-up volunteer, with my follow-up site mate at the DR. She comes from Mexican parents, and she also was Latina. She's also Latina. She had to have the same conversation with her parents, and my parents were completely against the whole thing until the day I left. Both of my parents were like, "You're crazy. I don't want you to do that. You don't have my support at all." Both of my parents said like, "Okay, fine. It looks like you're not gonna back down now." The day they dropped me off at the airport. That was the day. And so I had to go through the whole process by myself. And then when I was in the DR, having to worry about, I was in the DR during election season, and when Trump got elected, and I didn't have, communication, I didn't have internet access. So like having that anxiety when the election happened, was something completely different as well for me, because people had all these, you know, things that were going to happen, right? Like now that we have Trump as a president, they were like, okay, this is going to happen. This probably happens. For me, it was things that were reality for my parents. Like my parents could be targeted. My parents at any point going to a client's house, my mom's a housekeeper, my dad's a gardener. They experienced where one of their clients didn't want to pay them. They were like, okay, if you don't leave my house immediately, I will call immigration. So, you know, like during these were things that I had to think about and live with while I was serving in a different country. And so I was like, damn, my parents were right. I should just be in my own country, supporting and taking care of my own family. And so having those conversations now with potential Peace Corps volunteers, Latina women who want to do this, and assuring them how to have those conversations with parents, how to have those conversations with themselves, and assure them that it's the right path for them, or that if they even want to do it. So that's just kind of where I give my 2 cents and how Peace Corps has really shaped my experience, and also how has influenced me after Peace Corps as well.
More powerful information. Thank you, Elba. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Christine. My next question is, where and who do we go to, or who can we go to, or where can we go to get resources? Gina, what information do you have for us?
So there are so many resources out there, and the internet is, you know, so accessible, especially now. There's so many movies and books and podcasts we can listen to. You can find many lists online. I like to access CEO Action to learn about what other organizations are doing in the professional space, but I always like to watch shows that talk about experiences that are different from my own, and listen to podcasts of varied experiences. But if there's one tool that I want everyone to walk away with to look into, it would have to be restorative circles. And if you haven't heard of restorative circles before, it's an ancient Native American tradition of speaking around a fire. And it's a tool or a platform that is used to resolve conflict and build community. I didn't realize this at the time, but when I was 10 years old, in 5th grade, we would have circles every Friday at 2 p.m. and we would all sit in a circle, and there would be a talking piece, which it could be anything, anything in the classroom. And we each took turns speaking, and everyone had to listen. And if you didn't have the talking piece, you would not be able to speak. And it was such a great experience, because even the quietest person had something to share, and you don't even have to share anything. You could just hold the piece and really just be present in the moment. And in the circle, there's no hierarchy. Everyone is speaking from their own perspective, and there's no crosstalk, so you can't speak to someone else in the circle. You can only speak from the first person. And it's been an amazing tool that is used in not only the education system and in the prison system, but also in the workplace. I'm a restorative circle keeper. I was certified by an RPCV, actually, who does this as her full-time job. She has an organization where she trains people in restorative circles, and I really thank her for teaching me that tool, because it's something that I've been able to use in many, many dimensions of my life. And so if you ever want to learn more about restorative circles, or healing circles as they're called, you can feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or check with the organizers of this event, and put me in touch with them.
Thank you, Gina. Miles, what resources do you have for us?
What Gina said about the internet, I think, is very true. Obviously, it sounds like apparent, but really, you know, the world is your oyster. Like, Google truly is a resource. However, I wanted to speak to the fact of who is not and what is not a resource. I think that, and this is said a lot in these types of conversations, but the people who you're trying to support are not a resource for you to learn how to support them. And I don't think that that can be said enough. And I think oftentimes people think they know that, but they still might act as if they don't. I think, as a personal example, any Black person who I know who works or goes to school with or interacts on a daily basis with friends from other racial backgrounds after the murder of George Floyd got messages from people that were burdensome to them. Now, I think there's a very fine line which can be confusing to people. So, to give an example, I got messages from some Peace Corps people, from people who I felt close enough to and who did it in a way that was really genuine, that I really appreciated. And there's a difference between checking in on someone with whom you have a relationship and burdening someone who has a everyday lived experience with your momentary consciousness of their problems. So I just want to speak to or emphasize that as much as I can. But beyond that, I think what's really important is to consume media created by people who have different backgrounds from you. And not only who have different backgrounds from you, but who have diverse backgrounds within themselves. So if you have one source of, media representation of Black people in America, and you're not a Black person, then okay, that's great that you have one source of media representation, but that's very singular. I had, I guess you could call it a funny experience one time in high school. A classmate told me that they thought Kwanzaa was a stupid holiday. I said, why would you say that? And they said, well, because you think, he was speaking to me, because you think that that Black Santa gives you presents by flying around the world on a magic carpet. I said, where did that come from? Because I knew for a fact that had to have come from something in movies, television, and apparently that was an episode of Family Guy. And so for this person, that was their exposure. That was the entirety of their exposure to Kwanzaa. So the fact that maybe he knew what Kwanzaa was because of Family Guy, positive. But if you don't have a varied, a pot to draw from of representation of people from backgrounds other than yours, then you're not doing yourself so much of a service. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's pretty much what I have to say on that topic.
Thank you, Miles. Right into the next question. And I know we're running a little bit out of time. Y'all will be able to ask questions as well. So if you want to start typing up your questions now, we'll be able to get to a few of them. Just type them in the chat so that way we can get to those in a little bit. I think this next question is extremely important right now, especially after Miles had mentioned the murder of George Floyd. How do we safely and effectively celebrate and promote all diversity during these times? Pride, Black Lives Matter, COVID-19 is still a thing, as I unfortunately got it, and then now one of the statistics here in Arizona. So I'm going to ask Bruno to speak on this.
So again, I'm going to speak on it from my perspective. I've seen a lot of things, especially, after the murder of George Floyd, where a lot of Latinx folks really tiptoed the line, where they tried to bring on some other issues without first really trying to focus on the major issue that was at hand, which is systemic racism, especially geared towards Black folks, right? There was a couple of like images circulating in Mexico where they used that same image of George Floyd, but they put a young Mexican man there, not even an indigenous person. He was just like a mestizo man, who, yes, it's still police brutality, but still we're like taking away from the essence of Black people are being killed around the world. And so one of the things about how to safely and effectively promote, celebrate diversity during these times is the reason why I mention all that stuff is we're not trying to outshine one another, right? We're trying to uplift, we're trying to amplify, we're not trying to tear each other down. It also, a lot of times, I even find myself too doing this where I just feel angry with like everything and anything and anyone white. White meaning white, like American, right? And that's the reality that, I live in here in New York City, where we grew up. We're taking a train into Manhattan and you see all these white businessmen, or the people that police our neighborhoods are all white men that don't live in New York City. They live in like Long Island, or they live in like New Jersey or something. So a lot of times all these things are very easy to like try to outshine one another, right? We're just trying too much to like overpower one another. And to me, how to safely and effectively promote and celebrate diversity during these times is amplifying, sharing, holding space for others who don't necessarily have the opportunity to hold space, using your platforms effectively and in a way that other folks feel like they can really use them. Like Bruce Lee's, one of Bruce Lee's famous quotes is "Be water," right? To be able to effectively and promote and celebrate folks, you have to be water. You have to be able to shape yourself to the things that people need in those moments. You have to be proud of your heritage, but also question all the things that come before it. All these things will lead to like safely and effectively celebrating others. Especially, I see this a lot, and it's happened to me before in Pride festivals in New York City, where it's a lot of white gay men very much like taking front and center. And although those folks need to be celebrated and we want to include everybody, up until recently, a lot of Black queer folks, Latino queer folks, Black and Latino trans folks in New York City were really overpowered by this gay white man image. So I'm just using these as examples. This isn't always the case, but the way to to effectively celebrate others is not to try to outshine them, right? And not to try to cast a shadow over one of them or try to say like this is more important than that. Like, yes, there's Latino children, and then there's also Black children that are immigrants in detention centers, right? That issue is very, very important. The issue of systemic racism and Black folks being killed in the US and indigenous folks being murdered and ostracized as well is very important. The island of Puerto Rico has been, like, I call it under siege forever. And so, these are all very important issues that share the fact that they're a struggle, but obviously there are very important things that differentiate them. And I don't want it to be like a fight for the spotlight. There's ample space for everybody. But we also need to recognize that there are some things that are of more precedent, and just acknowledging that, and then moving forward, you know, acknowledging and then also elevating others with you, would be my answer to that.
Bruno, some more powerful information from you. Thank you. Christine, what advice do you have for us on this question?
In terms of celebrating others, and especially doing it right now in where we're being effective, I think a lot of the points have been covered by fellow panel members, but one thing I wanted to bring up that I think was touched on before was communities that we are all part of, and as well as creating those communities personally and getting to know the people who are actually putting their time. Because like we said, there are a lot of resources out there, whether it's online and the like, but just as much information as is out there, there's also misinformation. So, you know, going to trusted sources, and we all know, you know, I think that's something that we know about. But I think in addition to that, especially now when we don't get to maybe see each other in the traditional spaces that we would, work, school, home, making sure that you create a community for yourself of like-minded individuals that you know you can trust, and that you all check in with each other together. It's very important, and that, you know, that same circle of support that we're talking about, it's going to look differently because we're not seeing each other every day, but it can be calls, text, Zoom, and the like. And I just wanted to highlight that because, and do what works for you. Find the resource that works for you. And if you're not sure about it, find a community. There are many communities out there. Like, this is one, you know, we are all part of this. We are listening. So we have this community that we know of, people who we can come and ask and talk to. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, you know, we all have been, a lot of us maybe work from home, some don't. It can get tiring sometimes, like Zoom calls and messages and things like that. And just finding ways that work for you, but still connecting is very, very important. So I was just going to bring up the community aspect of creating that community for yourself and relying on communities that are already doing the work, and you know you're going to get trusted information from them to be part of your place where you go for resources as well.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to go to the next question here really quick. So what advice would y'all give to someone during these times to stay healthy? And when I say healthy, I mean emotionally, physically, and socially, because we have been in social distancing, we've been in quarantine. What are ways that you would give, what advice would you give someone to stay healthy this way? Gina, what do you have to say?
So during these difficult times, it's especially important that we try and stay healthy. For me, I've been meditating almost daily, and sometimes it's hard because you're in this go mindset, especially in New York City. But I found that even a moment to just sit and reflect and be present has helped me re-energize, and I was able to do more afterwards. Meditations can come in many different forms. Even a minute is really helpful for me. And there are hundreds of scientific studies that show that meditation has many benefits, including reducing implicit bias. So it doesn't help to just talk about meditating or thinking about it, but actually doing the work and meditating consistently can reduce implicit bias. And I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to really reflect on ourselves and kind of go back to the basics. The things that we've kind of taken for granted, we can really just start to appreciate. basic things like eating healthy and exercising and getting sleep is so important to be able to be physically, emotionally resilient during this time, especially since weaker immune systems can make us more vulnerable to the disease. So those are ways that I stay healthy during this time.
Ooh.
Lane, you're on.
I was muted. Sorry, guys. So, Bruno, what advice would you give to somebody to stay healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually, and socially during this pandemic?
I love all those suggestions that Gina gave. Unfortunately, I'm really lazy, and I'm forgetful, and I'm a human. And so a lot of times, like I say, like, oh, I'm gonna read like 15 minutes, or I'm gonna schedule this or that, or like I need to be productive. And like Gina said, here in New York City, it's like it feels like a rat race sometimes. You're always trying to do something. You always feel like you're not doing enough. And to me, the most important thing is to be forgiving with yourself. So there are days where, or there are weeks where, like I work out every day. There are the weeks that I only work out like maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Maybe 2 or 3 times a week. You know, so like to me, the biggest and best thing is like, yes, you want to try and strive and push yourself to like do what feels like can kind of like ease some of that tension that you have building inside your body. But then if you decide to like plop on your bed or on your couch and watch Netflix, know that it's not necessarily the healthiest choice. You know, like I finished a whole bag of Doritos watching New Girl, but it's like it happened and it's okay. Like I forgave myself and I was like, hey Bruno, like, you know, let's try again tomorrow. On the next day, I ate like 5 bowls of cereal and like I watched a different show. So it's just like about not blaming yourself and really trying to uplift yourself, being forgiving with yourself. Like you are human. We're all trying to make it out of this. Like, you know, you're not trying to like save the world necessarily in that specific instance. Like you're allowed to be human too.
Thank you, Bruno. So this last question that I have, I think it really relates to the current times and the social climate that we have been experiencing. So how did your Peace Corps service and your return from Peace Corps motivate you to get involved with social justice here in the United States? Gina, what do you have to say?
I actually want to give a special shout out to Michael Keel, who also sent some questions in the chat that I actually would like to tie in to my answer. Michael was in Peace Corps China with me. He served as a volunteer years before me, but then stayed on as a trainer. And he introduced me to a group called Racially Similar, Racially Different, which is similar to what Bruno described as a diversity inclusion committee. It was a group for those who identify as people of color. And it was a group that was started years before I got there as a PCV. And that experience of building a community amongst people of color as a volunteer was immensely helpful. And it really helped me process my thoughts around being a Chinese American in China. My students didn't think that I was American. They thought I was another student that because I looked so similar to them. And I almost felt in the beginning that they didn't want me as a volunteer. And it wasn't really something that they expressed to me, but I think I just had this sort of nervous feeling about not being the kind of volunteer that they expected. So the racially similar, racially different group was an amazing community where we could talk about our varied experiences and also help educate those who don't identify as people of color on ways that they can support us. So in some initiatives that we had included having sessions during IST or in-service training and MST, mid-service training, where we had closed sessions where we can just talk amongst our own community. And then we had open sessions where we had anyone who wanted to come and hear about our experiences do so. And we actually held a sort of restorative circle in that session. It was called the Fishbowl, and you can look up Fishbowl. It's a great way to share experiences and really build compassion and understanding amongst a group. So I love doing that work so much that inspired me to be even more involved with social justice coming back to the United States. So once I graduated, once I finished my Peace Corps experience, I wanted to study diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I did.
Thank you, Gina. Elba, how did your Peace Corps service motivate you to get more involved in social justice?
Well, as I worked in my community, I was working with a lot of young people, a lot of young women in getting into higher education and getting a degree and kind of bettering themselves for their families. And I just really connected so much with that concept that it really just kind of reiterate for me my passion for supporting women and women and first-gen students in the higher education sector specifically. And so I have a really big passion for service because it's through service that I have been able to learn so much, that I've been able to learn a lot of skills, career marketable skills. And so working at ASU as one of like the community service advisors for pretty much a lot of the big campus and the big colleges, and creating those experiences for first year students, creating those networks to be able to support them when they come into college for the first year. So just like my service in DR definitely just kind of paved my way into higher education. And just continuing to work with a lot of students of the similar backgrounds that I grew up with, I was able to see how being a Latina woman who spoke Spanish, who understood the culture, made such a difference in a different country. Just kind of opened my eyes on how much work I can also do in my own country, where I actually know policies, where my voice can be heard even more. Because as you're in a different country, like there's those things that you really don't want to mess with, right? Like politics. There's some of those things that I'm like, I don't really want to mess with those kinds of things. Because I might just be messing up with this community, and I'm going to be here for just 2 years. And how would this community be here left to deal with what I did? And so, so being able to just understand the difference between serving in a different country and then what I can do even better here in my own country to support the people that I grew up with, the communities that I connect with, that I identify with, was really something that was highlighted for me through my service. And so that's, I originally wanted to pursue a master's in social work, and then I changed to a master's in higher ed. And so it just kind of clicked for me, and honestly it was like the best decision because I have been able to support a lot of first-gen students, especially coming from Latino and immigrant backgrounds. So thank you.
Thank you, Elba. I want to get to Michael Keel's question about what services do you wish that you had in the Peace Corps? Let me read it again. I don't want to mess up your question, Michael Keel. Oh my goodness. Where'd it go? The question was based around what services do you wish that you had in your service, and how did Peace Corps help you? And what did they not do, and what did they do to support you in your service? Bruno, how would you answer that?
So Alba had mentioned before how difficult it was to speak to her family about going to the Peace Corps. I felt like I wish there was a little bit more support around families of color. We can't always afford to lose a child to go abroad. So for example, my mom's status in this country, legal status in this country, is always like up in the air. It like she's technically a resident right now, but like it runs out in November, right? So my mom, and it's been like something that she always has had to apply to, and she's always been very scared of leaving the U.S. Never been able to like leave to like go visit her family in Colombia up until recently, our family in Colombia. And so I feel like something that Peace Corps could have done, not necessarily in country, but maybe beforehand, especially to attract more folks of color and diverse backgrounds, is to support those families, right? To support those volunteers or those potential volunteers in trying to get to Peace Corps, because our experiences, our shared experiences in this country are going to be able to, I feel like we, in many cases, empathize on a different level with the struggles that are going on in the host country. So I feel like one of the big things that Peace Corps could do is to try to support these families, right? I know that a lot of times it's stretched thin, Peace Corps budget and all that stuff, but I really feel like if they're really trying to support and include diverse voices, faces, colors, backgrounds, everything, then they really should reach out to the family, especially like if they want more Latinx folks to apply. My mom was always like, why are you gonna leave to go serve in the Dominican Republic when our family needs help in Colombia? Or why are you gonna leave when like your little sister needs help with her homework? You know, so it's just like all these different things. Like I'm not just a son to somebody, I'm also kind of like a parent because I helped my family raise my siblings. So just that family support for a lot of folks.
Thank you, Bruno. Elba, can you share real quickly?
Yeah, just like my 2 cents, I think that it also it doesn't just start when a Peace Corps volunteer comes to country. I think the conversation starts very early on. As someone who works in the higher ed area, working with a lot of people who do the recruitment of Peace Corps volunteers, that conversation needs to happen as soon as a student is interested. You know, like how is Peace Corps going to support them and having those conversations with their parents, connecting them with RPCVs like myself, being able to have these experience, you know, like these potential experiences, like not just, you know, like part of the interview process, they ask you like, how comfortable are you with having no electricity and no running water? I'm like, well, I do visit my family in Guatemala every summer to see my family, so I am pretty comfortable with that. How about you tell me about how comfortable I am with having this conversation with my parents? Or like, what kind of support is there for this? Or, you know, just like, so that conversation needs to start a lot earlier. Because I do also see the benefit of us Latinos or Latinx people serving in different countries. You know, we bring a completely different diverse experience. We bring a different idea of what America is or what Americans are. Speaking the same language allows us to be able to understand the culture, being just like it gives us a little bit of a leeway in a way, or a little bit of an advancement in project management, in starting projects, and things like that. And so like I do see that there is you know, there is something, that a benefit for us to serve in a country where we know the language and we know the culture. But definitely starting these conversations a lot earlier than when you're already in country, because then there's also that year gap, right? Like that you are going through the whole application process and you're like, I can't really find a job because I can't commit. And then you're right out of college. And so like your parents are expecting you to get a job. You have student loans coming in. So like that whole process of way before you even go to Peace Corps and get to country, and then you realize that you also will have these lived experiences probably. So just having that as well, because for Latinos as well, and I'm sure for other cultures, our parents are a big support system, and so that's just kind of like my 2 cents on that.
Thank you so much, Alva. Great points as usual. I do realize it's 7:29. If y'all have to leave, I understand that. I want to respect your time. There is one last question that was mentioned in the chat that I do want to get to. I think it's very important. So I understand if you have to leave. And this is recorded and it will be posted on social media as well, so you will have access to that. The last question is, do we feel Peace Corps has been open to hearing our voices and making the necessary changes within the organization and ensuring PCVs of color are supported? Gina, how would you answer that?
That is a great question. I can only speak to my experience for Peace Corps China, and I have to say that Peace Corps China was immensely supportive of RPCVs of color. We had staff that were people of color, so we had people that looked like us who we can go to for advice and just to talk through processing what it was like to be American abroad. The Peace Corps staff always gave space for PCVs to address our concerns and really supported us. We had a staff liaison that we could go to at any time to bounce ideas off of. I'm not sure about other Peace Corps posts, but I would recommend that maybe there could be some best practices conference for all the Peace Corps posts, or a training or a document to really streamline how to support our PCVs of color, so that every post can be as supportive to our PCVs.
Miles, how would you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, rather, the answer is yes, but I think it's worth noting. I mean, we all know Peace Corps is very decentralized in terms of what the on-the-ground experience is for different people, and it's a high turnover organization by design. So I think it's a lot like our earlier conversations about, you know, are we all being allies? It's not a static status, right? So yes, in my experience, but I know in other people's experiences, no, unfortunately. To me, I think what's really important to be able for Peace Corps rather to be able to say yes consistently that it is doing well on this is to have some type of structure. The Diversity Inclusion Committee that Bruno mentioned, that he and members of his cohort started in DR, has had a lasting impact on Peace Corps DR. And that's just because the structure exists, so that administration in general, not just the country director, but all Peace Corps staff has an avenue through which they can invite critical feedback specifically from volunteers from marginalized identities. And so without that very targeted structure, you're just not going to get the same type of feedback, and that's going to lead to I guess substantial growth without it. So that's my, I think, biggest like takeaway from my experience on this topic is to have a structure in place.
Thank you, Miles.